Today we'll explore the entirety of Pandaria in under 3 hours, but we're not allowed to use a flying mount to get to those pesky locations on the map. The timer's afoot, and we already have a problem. Apparently you can't just waltz into the portal without doing the quest to get into Jade Forest, and since we're doing a no questing run, we're kinda stuck. But we have a deadline to complete, so we need to scour our options, and after a couple of different methods, this one works out just fine. If you start the quest line but don't turn it in, and then run to the portal in the mage quarter, you can get access to it, and we can explore the best panda connoisseurs of our tailbolts. Our least complicated zone to start us off is Dread Waste. Although a level 30 zone, Dread Waste is like a perfect circle, except if it wasn't like a circle at all, and if the ring had a bulge slowly floating away. The landscape is condensed to be a quick exploration, albeit with a dangerous spot like the Heart of Fear raid. We'll have to travel through the mantid infestation if we hope to conquer this incredibly daunting task of... and there's a way around it if you go through the back door. Oh, that's cool. They also have an island, my mortal enemy. The worst of the worst. I hate you, island. I hate you. But no, seriously, it's nothing to write home about. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 5 out of 10 difficulty, and we can complete the borders of Dread Waste in about 14 minutes. At number 6 on the difficulty list, we have the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. Trekking around another level 30 zone might seem daunting, but getting into the zone is the most challenging task. Since you didn't do the Temple of the White Tiger quest line, because of course we're not doing any quests, the gate is still closed, so we'll have to find another way in, which honestly is not that hard. Kunlai has a spot where you can get to the wall, then run over until you've approached the yellow colored grass of this immaculate zone, and boom, you're now the king of exploring this dangerous terrain. But once you get here, the zone is much like a smaller Ajara if you take away all the water and worship Garish Hellscream. So precisely like Ajara. We did have to trek the problematic location of the Shrine of Two Moons, a horde festering zone where the people are still hungry for Alliance blood if they can get their hands on it. Can we possibly defeat some of the world's greatest heroes guarding the outside of the borders? Find out if yes. Yes, we can. A spot on the left of their flank is open for Deer Dash to drop off its package, and then you can go and get the rest of the zone pretty quickly. As such, this place also gets a 5 out of 10 for the get in mentality, and it's wrapped up in around 27 minutes. That will be on the final. But now we've got to put on our explorer hats. Can we avoid malaria while heading into the depths of Karasang Wilds for our number 5 spot? This zone takes number 5 because it essentially has two components, the mainland and the island. The mainland is a sort of swoosh-looking pattern that decides to check you with several quests you didn't want in the first place, but they'll automatically put it in your log, so you will have to go in and delete it because all you wanted to do was get on your wild side. Meanwhile, islands are essentially each their own location to explore, so just going to one doesn't cover up all of your problems with swimming to Hawaii. Get your clothes wet after inhaling a disease-filled air, and discover the crane people spinning around like a cyclone, and you shouldn't have the worst time of it. The wilds are 6 out of 10 difficulty because of the double component, so it is a step up in scale, but they can be completed in around 18 minutes. Steady your notes. Who likes cliff dives? Because you're about to get a couple of those in the number 4 spot of Kunlai. We can break down the mountain range into 3 parts to inspect and protect. The lowlands are the entrance inwards, the mountains, which are the snowy fixtures above, and then the islands, which are probably the lowest spot of them all. Firstly, the lowlands aren't too bad of an exploration. It's pretty straightforward if you like running around into Bull Moose variant number 5 in several spots. Stay away from the angry shaman and you'll be okay. The mountains can be a little more tricky though. They do have some pathways to follow, but they're not straightforward, and you might find yourself on some cliffside trying to avoid the snowballs of death looking to add your head to their kill count. Also, Peak of Serenity doesn't have a particular path upwards, so finding the spot where you can explore it can be a little annoying. But the biggest issue is the island down below. Technically, there are 2 here. The first is the Isle of Reckoning off the coast of an otherwise upper terrain field, meaning it's time for that succulent cliff dive everyone loves to do. There is also the Isle of Giants, where if you get up to it, then it's technically considered explored at that point. Technically, it isn't part of the summit, so I won't be including it in my final rating, but since we can get to it, I'll mark it here. It's not all bad though, as there is a village where once you grab the flight path, the mainland is accessible with ease, so I won't judge too harshly on Kunlai for layout's sake. We can rope our way out of the summit with a 6 out of 10 difficulty rating and a time of around 23 minutes. Annotate that. But now we're taking on the bronze or jade zones, because you know, it's a Jade Forest. Notably, Jade Forest is higher on this list because its layout is massive and it has no discernible pattern to explore. To put it in perspective as a zone, this place equals the mainland sizes of Townlong and Dread Waste, all put together in a crispy, over-the-wall package. It has the second most items to explore regarding mapping. There aren't any notable dangerous spots here, but the size and scope are insane enough to take on some time. Like all the other zones of the sort, they had to put an island off the coast here. Unlike Kunlai, however, the flight path back to this isle isn't nearly as available, and I found myself using a kite to climb back up to the northern half of the map. There was also some issues with figuring out where Gruken Hill begins and ends, and I found myself being punched a couple times from the monkey business at the Hosen. So yeah, it did pump up the difficulty just a bit, earning itself a rating of 7 out of 10 and giving me a finish time of around 28 minutes. Go ahead and mark that Scantron, folks, we're almost to the end of it. Picking the silver spot on our list, Town Long Steps is essentially a bunch of islands put together to call it a zone. I didn't realize that Hawaii would be a full-on country in Azeroth, yet here we stood. Starting off, the mainland itself isn't the most atrocious thing to travel. It's compared to most of our smaller land masses on the continent up to this point. The difficulty comes from the amount of cliff diving from waltzing onto island kind. The Zhao Temple isn't that bad, as there is a bridge that can loosely get you to the central hub for other 3 spots on the map. Well, once you're there, you'll need to find these spots to get into the different zones. The first is Stravis, and this place is a dangerous zone for anyone looking to get up close and personal with the island face. I used Wild Charge to choose a shortcut by crossing the bridge and jumping onto it, but once I got there, the Mantid was swarming me within a minute of arriving. I did survive because I didn't feel like bug food was my fate, but it still felt like a real potential dangerous zone. Next was Shanzedao, which compared to Stravis isn't nearly as dangerous of a land to touch on. It's just annoying to swim over and mark on the map. Once you get there, exploring it isn't the worst time you'll have, so it'll be taken care of in no time. And finally, the Siege Temple. Now, if you want to do the actual exploration credit here, you'll need to recheck the bridge in order to get to the spot itself, because just going through the log takes you into the dungeon. This can be tricky because jumping into the wrong spot can get you to fall tons of feet into the one below. And that means you're going to likely have to go back to the Nizao Temple so you can trek back to the siege spot. Thankfully, this didn't take me very long, but I could see someone getting frustrated if not careful. Overall, the silver spot takes a 7 out of 10, as while it is annoying, I found only one spot where danger truly stuck. And on top of a 23-minute time, it isn't the worst. And so now, we've reached our final destination. Ladies and gentlemen, Valley of the Four Winds takes the cake as the primary spot on our list. Upon initial inspection, Valley doesn't seem like it has much to hold the attention for long. Its layout is flat and appears sort of like an ellipses pattern that wouldn't take long for anyone to explore. And if we were looking at the zone just for that, then you'd likely be correct, and it probably would have fallen around the 5th, maybe even 6th place on our list. But Blizzard had to throw in one last curveball of a dying era in their games. They had to one-up themselves one last time before finally putting the concept of fly-only spots to rest. They had to add Kunzin Village. Explorable as part of the dailies in Half Hill, Kunzin is a dominant Hosen village that scales high up on a mountain of this otherwise seemingly flat valley. But unlike most other areas in the hills of Pandaria, this one seems like it wasn't designed for people who didn't have flying to take on. My initial attempts were set near a cave where the Mogu had taken over. I knew that at this point flying from dying was an option now, so I wasted no time trying to get the Mogu to kill me and get a higher vantage point on a spot otherwise inaccessible to ground explorers. This did work to some degree, and I could get to a couple spots higher up where I was just in reach of my goals. However, upon reaching where I thought the best place was to take the trek, I discovered that the one cliff spot I needed to jump was nearly impossible without outside assistance and glider kits or player help. It just seemed like the slope to jump was too steep to do the entire climb, and on top of that, if I missed a jump, there was a chance I'd go flying off the cliffside or die down below from a mistimed attempt. I spent a good bit of time here, and when time is your enemy, you tend to get more desperate as things move along. Each moment passing was a moment I couldn't spend sitting here wondering if it was possible. I needed to either find another way or accept that this was impossible. And I'm not gonna lie, at least from the starting point, I accepted the latter. There was no way to make this jump, even if I wanted to. Keep in mind that while I'm ranking these, I, at the time, had several other zones to cover as well. So after a reasonable few attempts at this, I left and resolved to give the zone a 9 out of 10 in difficulty for this one monkey business location alone. But then, something else occurred. Let's take a moment to look at our options. Yes, Valley seems off limits, but what if we can approach the spot differently? What if the answers we seek aren't in our viewing zone? What if we just needed a new site to help us out? Well, friends, I introduce to you the Veil of the Eternal Blossoms. Remember that 20-minute time frame I told you to write down on your exam? Well, here's why you should have. As it turns out, this zone has a spot called the Tu Shen Burial Ground, but this burial ground happens to just be north of the Hosen village for our purposes. So, here's our theory. What if we tried a dead flight mechanic on this side instead of the other? But I only had about 9 minutes to make this happen, because at the end of the Veil exploration, I was at around 2 hours and 51 minutes. So we can't afford to do any messing here. Desperation in my eyes, I scoured the cliffside looking for a hopeful sign. The first spot I dragged a Mogu over to killed me off, and then I tried to use a flight mechanic to get upwards, only to realize the mountain becomes too steep once again, and with no mob to help me kill off one more time, I couldn't reliably sit there and get this done. With only minutes remaining, it seemed like all hope was lost. That is, until I found a second spot just a bit off to the right of the cliff face. This required 2 deaths instead of just 1, but this was my only chance. The first death once again came at the hands of the Mogu, who propelled me up to a step to get a noticeable crack in the mountainside, which just so happened to be right at the top of the village. But the Mogu are gone, and I can't reach them from here. So is all hope lost? Well, as it turns out, there are 2 goats that also rest where you need to be. So with hastened movements, I pulled both goats as far to the cliffside as I can, and I let myself go down. Now it was up to the cliff. We fly upwards, land, and pray that it isn't just another broken dream. And this time, it isn't. We can split down the middle and make the clink in the armor. We finally explored the valley and get Pandaria under our map. But did those deaths cost us? Did we lose because our time was not enough to hold us over? Well, it seemed that, despite our best efforts, after 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 40 seconds, a literal minute and 20 seconds away from failure, we finished this in an 8 out of 10 difficulty zone. Sadly though, only 5% of you are true explorers.